In this video, I'm going to walk you through the use of a extremely powerful tool that is behind Microsoft Excel. In fact, it's behind all of the Microsoft products, PowerPoint, Word, etc. And so this is a way that you can actually write very, very simple little programs that'll help you do analysis or just make your work a little bit easier. So the first thing we're going to need to do is to make sure that we see the developer menu. Okay, and when you load up Excel, if you don't see the developer menu, the first thing you need to do is you need to do a right click on the, the ribbon here, click on Customize Ribbon, and then you'll see a list of menu tabs here on the right. And you need to make sure that the developer tab is clicked on. Okay, so I've got it already clicked on, so I'm gonna push OK here. All right. The next thing you're gonna do is you're gonna click on the developer tab, and you need to make sure that all of these icons look like they're usable. Okay, if they're not usable, then you need to click on macro security. Hopefully that one will be usable. And you need to make sure that you enable VBA macros. Notice that it's saying enable VBA macros, not recommended, potentially dangerous code can run. So you need to be careful. If a macro is a powerful programming environment that can do a lot of damage to your file and others, if it gets in and is written by the wrong people. So, but if you're careful, you won't have any trouble. So make sure that it says enable VBA macros. You can turn this off at a later date if it makes you feel uncomfortable. But you'll need to have it on to do the work that we're going to go over today. All right, so the first thing we're going to try to do is record what's called a macro. A macro is nothing more than a sequence of commands that will that you can then repeat over and over again. So I'm going to start by clicking on the button Record Macro. Okay, and it will pop up this menu and give me a name, and we'll just leave it as macro 1, and I want to save this in this workbook, so we're going to associate it with this particular workbook. The other option is to put it in your personal macro workbook. I'll talk a little bit about that at the very end, but for the most part we're going to stick with just this workbook. Okay, I'm going to push OK here. All right, now the commands, whatever I do on the screen, is going to be recorded in this macro. So I'm going to click on cell A1 here, and I'm going to write hello. Oh, and then I'm going to write in the in A2, I'm going to write world. All right. So we've got a very simple command, and then I'm going to click on stop recording here. Okay. So we have now recorded those commands. Now that we have created a macro and saved it, we probably want to save that file. Now, this is no longer just a regular old Excel file, so we need to save it as an XLSM file. So we're going to go File, Save As, and let's just put it in the default directory, but I'm going to change it to XLSM, a macro-enabled workbook. Okay, and I'll just give it a name. I'll call it like test macros. And we'll save it like that. Okay, so we have now saved it as a macro-enabled workbook, and you can open this up again. An important thing that you need to know about XLSM files is that you cannot send them as email attachments through the A&M system. It'll filter them out and say, hey, this is a dangerous file. So you want to be sharing these files using either a flash drive, or you can put them up on the web storage and then share a link to that, but you can't send them as an email attachment. And you need to be careful. As I mentioned at the beginning of the discussion, there are security issues with macro-enabled files that you need to be aware of. Now let's look at, I can now look at the macros by clicking at the macro menu item here, and you'll see there's only one macro and it's in the open workshop. So I could put run, but if I clicked run, what it's going to do is it's going to do exactly the same thing that we have before. So instead I'm going to click on edit, okay? And when I click on edit, it's going to open up a new window that should look like this. There's different parts of this window that you want to make sure are open. The most important part hopefully will appear right here on the right, okay? And that is where the commands are shown. The window here on the left is the VBA project. That's telling us what kind of environment we were working in. So we've got a book 1, we've got a book 2. I guess I have 2 spreadsheets open, and I have added in module 1 my macro 1 that we just recorded. Now let's see what macro 1 does. All right, it's very simple. It says range A1 select, all right, active cell formula R1C1, that means row 1 C1 relative to the active cell is hello. That's what I typed over here on the left. You can still see that. Range A2 select, I move down to the next row. I said active formula for that cell is world. And then I go to selecting A3. So that's what this very simple macro did. To make my life simpler, and I'm going to use the Windows key and the right arrow, and I'm going to move that the VBA stuff to the right, okay? And I'm going to make this Project Explorer part of this much smaller, okay? And I'm going to put the Excel spreadsheet here on the left, okay? So now I can see what's going on here on the left over and over again. Now, you'll notice that I have at the top of the screen, I could put run, all right? And if I run that, what's it going to do? Well, it's going to it's going to go to A1, type the word hello, A2, type the word world, and then go to A3. And so let me just click that, and you'll see nothing change. However, if I come back over here to my spreadsheet and delete those words, okay, and now I push it again, it reproduces them because it ran through those words, those commands again. One very convenient thing to do is you frequently want to do debugging. So you can do that by this command called step into, right? And notice that that's with the F8 key. So I'm not going to do this with the menu anymore. I'm going to do step 8 with now I'm going to press the F8 key on my keyboard. So when I do it, when I'm debugging and I press F8, the first thing it does is it's going to highlight the first row of the command, and then it's going to select, you'll see on the left, it now has selected A1. All right, now it's going to run the next line where it types the word hello. And now it's going to select, when I press F8, I select A2, and then I click F8 again, it types the word world, and then I go to selecting A3, and I'm done. Okay? So that's, again, my very simple command. Again, one more time, I'm going to just delete those 2 words there, and now I'm going to press the F8 key one by one, hello world, and I'm done. Now, notice that I have A1, A2, and A3. I could easily do this on B1, I'm just editing those 2, B1, B2, and B3, okay? And I'm going to now again, debugging. I'm going to select B1, type hello. Okay. All right. Now, all of that is hopefully fairly simple and intuitive, but it's not very useful, right? So one thing that can be useful, I'm going to just start with make a new command here, all right? But I'm gonna rather create a new macro, but I'm going to do that using relative references, okay? So I'm going to click on relative references here, and now I'm going to go to um, cell A4, okay? And now I'm going to click on record macro again, okay? And I'm going to push record macro. I'm going to call this one not macro 2, but we'll call it macro 2. That's fine, all right? And we'll push OK, all right? And now I'm going to say hi, and I'm going to push enter and go to the next cell. Um, and hi, AGEC 317. And then I'm going to push enter again, and again I'm going to stop. Okay? You'll notice here on the right, as I was typing that stuff, I was recording the information. Now, the important difference by using relative references, you'll see it's now saying active cell, formula R1. So it's now not referring to a particular cell. It's just saying the active cell. I'm going to put high. And then I'm going to active cell offset 1 comma 0. That means offset, move down by one row, or move by one row down and 0 columns over. And then this range A1 select is not necessarily, but it's always appears when you record a macro. We could even delete that and it won't make any difference, you'll see. Okay, and I'll delete it from this one as well. Okay, all right. The important thing to notice here is what we've done here is we're now relative to the active cell. So now I'm going to use my F8 key and I'm going to step through this macro sub, highlights macro 2. Right, I go to active cell formula R1C1 and it's going to type hi. Look on the left now in A6, it has written the word hi. In I'm going to active cell, I'm going down one row. I write AGEC 317 and I go down again. And I can do that. Now I'm going to hit the continue button, which I could also access by F5, and selecting this, I run that again and again and again. All right, and you'll see now that's looking like it could be useful because it's now a sequence of commands that you could imagine repeating over and over again. Okay, so if you have a complex, obviously much more complex than high AGEC 317 sequence of commands, recording those, and you want to repeat them over and over and over again, right? Recording them as a macro can be very useful. So if, for example, you're taking you want to implement a sequence of commands and you've done that every single time and you've got a list of your data and you want to, every time you get to your data, you want to repeat it. Well, seeing how you repeat it is easily done using the record macro option. The next thing I want to teach you how to do is how to write a new function. So let's imagine that we're going to create a very simple function. All right, I'm going to just write the word function. That's telling Visual Basic that I'm creating a function. I'm going to call this function my add. Okay, I'm going to make it a function of 2 variables, and I'm going to call those variables A and B. Okay, all right. And my add, all it does is add up. All right, so I'm going to call my add. I'm going to simply say that my add equals A plus B. Okay? All right? And we push enter, and we have now created a function. Now the beauty comes in on that is I can come over here and I click on formulas, insert function, right? And I'm going to click down here and then go all the way down to user defined. Okay. And I've got a bunch of other things that I've apparently are available. But I don't know where these come from, to be completely honest. But I do see my ad is in that list. So I'm going to click OK. And I can click my ad is 7 as a function of 7 and 9. Okay. All right. And I push OK. And of course, 6 and 9 is equal to 15. So I could also, if I had numbers 6 and 9 here in my spreadsheet, okay, I could edit this command, and instead of writing 6 and 9 here, I could say my add, instead of 6, the cell B16, and instead of 9, I select the cell B17, and that will work just fine too. Obviously, the function my add is equal to A plus B is not very useful. But suppose that you actually have this strange function or a complicated function that you need to be using over and over again. Maybe it's A plus B, but you're going to divide that by B, all right? And let's use parentheses again, and I'm going to multiply that times A times A. All right, so A squared. All right, so now that's, I don't know why you'd ever want a function like that, but that function might, some complicated function like that you might want to use. So now if I come over here and I click on this and I recalculate it by just opening it up, now you see I'm getting 60, right? Which is 6 plus 9 divided by 6, or divided by 9 times 6 times 6, which is 36. And again, I can now change these numbers. Instead of making this 6, I could make it 2, all right? Or even I can make it minus 2, all right? And see what happens there. All right, so you'll see by creating a complicated function that can sometimes prove useful. The next thing I want to do is teach you how to write your own subroutine to do some simple functions or simple operations. So to create a function, you'll see just like in the macros above, we're going to use the word sub, all right? And then we're going to call my data entry, all right? Okay, and I'm just going to put the open and close parentheses like we have there. Okay, all right. Now, I'm going to first define X as equal to input box, and then the title for the input box is going to be first variable. Okay, all right. And then I'll have Y equals second. Oh, sorry, input box again. Second variable. You'll see that Excel or Visual Basic gives you a lot of other things that you can add to, variations that you can do, but all of those are optional. All you really need to do is have the input box with a prompt. So we're going to keep it really simple here. All right. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say active cell dot value equals X and active cell dot offset. I'm going to do it. I want to do it on the same row. So no rows are offset. All right. One column is offset. Okay. Dot value is equal to Y. All right. And then I want to do what we have in the up above where I'm stepping down to the next row. All right. So I'm going to say active cell dot offset 1 comma 0 dot select. Okay. All right. So now let's see if that works. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to start on row A19. And let's just, using the F8 command, I'm going to walk through this step by step again. All right. All right. First thing it's going to do is it's run this command x equals input box first variable. And at that point, it's going to give you one of those input boxes. So let's make those. I'm going to type my name, Rich. Okay. All right. All right. And now it's going to jumps to the next row. All right. And the second variable, we'll call that Woodward. All right. Active cell. I click down. It runs through all of that because it's got it calculates all the cells. And then it fills in those values of active cell X and Y on the spreadsheet. Okay. All right. All right. So as you see now, when I run this thing, I could now run it again, right, with the F5 key. And in this case, let's make it, I'm going to make it, I can put a number in there, right, 8 and 14, right, done. Again, run it again, make it John, and John got an A in the class. Okay. So you see there's a lot of ways that you could use something like this. Last thing I want to make sure that you understand is to be able to use these things in a way that makes sense. All right, because right now to come over here and open up the Visual Basic interface in order to run your macros is not very helpful. So in order to make your life easier, you can come back to the developers menu and click on this insert icon here, right, which gives you the ability to add a button or a control. Okay, so we're going to click on that. Then you just indicate where you want that button to appear. And then it's going to ask you, what do you want to do? And I want to do my data entry. Okay, right, push OK here, right? And if I click on this text now, I can delete it and data entry. All right. And I click outside of that and I'm done. So now anywhere I go, I can say data entry, right? First variable, column D, second variable, column E, and I'm done. And then I can click on it again and say John Doe and Susie Smith. Okay. So that's a very simple data entry sequence of commands that you might find useful. The next thing I want to cover quickly is how to save macros in a way that you can be use them over and over again whenever you want. You'll recall at the beginning when we were recording our first macro, we had to choose whether to save it in this workbook or in your personal workbook. If you store it in the personal workbook, then that's a file that you can open up. You can put all of your macros there. You can put functions there that you've created and then use them easily over and over again. So what I'm going to do here to demonstrate this is I'm going to click on Use Relative References, and then I'm going to click on Record Macro, and we'll call this Y yellow, green, red. Okay, and instead of saving it in this, I'm going to put it in the personal workbook, personal macro workbook. Push OK. All right, and the reason I'm going to call this yellow, green, red is that I'm going to go here, home, and I'm going to make that cell yellow, and then I'm going to make that cell green, and then I'm going to make that cell, next cell, red. Okay, and then I'm going to go down one more, and I'm going to go back here to developer, and I'm going to stop recording. Okay, now I can go to the macros list, and I can edit here. Okay, and you'll see that now I not only see my hello world in the VBA project associated with this folder. I also have a new VBA project down here called personal.xlsb, and if I open that up, you'll see that there is a module called module 1. All right, and look at this. I now have selection B3, selection interior, range B4, selection interior, range B5, selection color interior. I've got all of those cells and I'm done, right? And I could come in here and edit this, for example, and I could say, I could get rid of that. So this is now going to happen anywhere. And I'm going to, instead of, I'm going to do active cell dot offset 1 row down and 0 columns over, and I'm going to select that. Okay, all right, and then I'm going to replace the other cells with that, or the other places where I have selected a particular cell. Okay, and now I can, moving that screen over to the right and moving workbook over here to the left, I can now run this command. I'm going to use the F8 and just run through the command, yellow, green, red, and just like that. So I could then save that and run that particular command anytime that I want to. So that's going to be stored in personal.xlsb, which will be in a special folder within your on your computer. If you ever need to find that file, you should probably look it up on the internet to figure out where it is. But for the most part, as long as you're using your home computer or your personal computer, it will be saved in the right place, and it'll always be accessible from this point on. When you exit the Excel, it will ask you whether or not you want to save that personal XLSB file, and then you can do it again. As I mentioned, this is particularly useful if you've got functions that you're using over and over again and you want to be able to access them. And in which case, you would, the easiest way to do that is you go to Formulas and you insert function, and it will give you an option of user-defined functions, and then that will give that you'll be able to access the functions that you have written yourself. So that's how to work with the personal workbook and save that. The last thing I want to do is introduce you to the idea of using ChatGPT or open other AI type of interfaces to help you learn how to code. So what I have open here is I've got ChatGPT open on the left, and on the right I've got my VBA module. All right, and I've written in a prompt, can you write a VBA sub that will ask for the first and last name and place those results in the first and second column of the active spreadsheet? So I just say, okay, let's do it and see what happens. All right, and you'll see it says certainly you can create a VBA sub, and it starts writing code and it tells you how to use it. But let's go back up here. We already know how to use VBA subs, so I'm just going to take copy code, and then I'm going to come over here to VBA, and I'm going to paste it down. All right, and let's see if it works. I'm not even going to read it. I'm just going to see if it works. I'm going to open up the spreadsheet here on the left and the command on the right. I'm going to walk through it line by line using the F8 key. F8, first name, and it asks for my first name. So I'm going to type Rich. Okay, and then it's going to ask my last name, Woodward, and then it does some error checking, which is good. You probably wouldn't have thought to do that. I didn't think to do that, but it does some error checking for us. Takes the active sheet and it takes the it puts it into first row and last first name and last name into the active row. That's great. So so you can see that it was very smart. It gave me good code. Let's just make a slight modification. I'd like the code to repeat adding new names in successive rows until I push cancel. All right, so now we're going to just modify that, and what does ChatGPT do? Does it to have the repeated as name? Saying you just choose cancel. You can modify the code as follows. So I'm just going to copy that code again. I'm going to put it here. All right. Again, I'm going to paste it down. I've eliminated the other one, and now it's doing what's called a loop. Okay, and so again, we will load up the spreadsheet on the left-hand side, and let's start in row 9, and I'm just going to push, instead of pushing F8, I'm going to push this the run form, F5, which will just run the whole thing. Okay, and we'll see how that works. All right, Rich Woodward. Okay, all right, John Doe, Susie Smith. And now I push cancel, and it's done. It worked great. The point here is not to learn how to do this specific thing, but rather to know that you can, like a macro, you can ask ChatGPT to write a program that will do something for you, and it will do it very, very successfully. You can then modify that, you can learn from it, and you can become a pretty skilled programmer pretty fast. So, great tool that wasn't even widely available only at the beginning of 2023, and now it's changing the way we're writing programs. Enjoy it and make good use of it. Do be careful. Notice that GPT makes mistakes, right? If you're doing something complicated in particular, it may not give you exactly what you want. So you've got to be careful, debug it, and it's also important to look at your code and make sure that you understand exactly what it's doing. All right. In the exercises, I ask you to try out each of these tasks, modify your own functions, and show that you can use Visual Basic to do some very simple analysis. Good luck and enjoy it.